When Nancy learns that the Drew's housekeeper has been duped by an elegantly dressed woman into buying a stolen fur piece, the young detective starts a search for the clever swindler. To Nancy's astonishment, she discovers the woman is using the name Nancy Drew. The dishonest acts of the impostor points the finger of suspicion at Nancy herself, and it results of her being questioned by the police. Join me and Nancy as we solve the mystery and clear her name. Let's read The Mystery at the Ski Jump. Hello, my hopefuls. I am the Esperanza243. Welcome to my channel. Today we're doing a book reading, instead of treadmill dancing. I promised treadmill dancing when I presented my Vine compilation last week, and something came up actually that made me change my mind. I recently found out that a family friend lost her father, and since I don't know her family much, I decided to do a book reading in her father's honor. Technically it's not something that he did, but I remembered learning a couple years ago that one of her great aunts was a ghostwriter for the Nancy Drew detective series, which is pretty cool. And I ended up reading that on my radio show for a while. Actually, I read the whole book. So her great aunt that happened to be a ghostwriter for the Nancy Drew detective series, her name is Alma Sasse. And the book she wrote happens to be The Mystery at the Ski Jump. And it's actually a really good book. It's actually one of my favorites. I think because I know that her great aunt wrote it. But it's also one of the books where Nancy Drew has to clear her own name. Rarely does that ever happen. It's actually, I don't know if it's the first edition or not. I mean, it doesn't really say in the book, but it's pretty cool because it's copyrighted in 1952, so that's good. At least it's close to one of the originals. I'm actually really excited. But there is one more thing I want to bring up, and that is this beautiful necklace that I'm wearing. It's a little mermaid. No, it's not Ariel. But it's like this little silver metallic mermaid, kind of like hollowed out on the back of it. And along with this beautiful stone, at least I think it's a stone. It's really pretty. At first I didn't like it. I was like, meh. Then I looked at the back and oh my gosh, it was like the purest green I had ever seen or something like that. Kind of reminds me of jade. I got it for my oldest sister. It turns out she has like a whole bunch of gifts for me, but she doesn't want to like wait out. Or I think they were originally supposed to be Christmas gifts or something like that. But she's decided to give them to me one at a time for like certain exciting events or something like that. And so she decided to give this to me, like, cause like she wanted to go ahead and give me one already, but she wanted to wait until something exciting happens. And I'm like, well, I did write a whole book in 12 days. And she's like, okay, let's do that. And she asked me if I wanted something pretty or if I wanted something useful or something like that. And I'm like, well, let's wait. In my head, I was thinking, let's wait for the useful, because I could probably use that probably later on, rather than right now. And I'm like, okay, I told her I would rather have something pretty. And it was this beautiful necklace. Normally I'm not a necklace wearer, but if it's something that I absolutely adore or end up being super grateful because it's from my family, like, I'll wear it. I'll wear it. I love this necklace. I'm so glad she gave it to me. I'm actually really excited that we're starting this book. I would bring up her name, but for the sake of publicity stuff, like, I know she's not much into, like, her photo being captured, and I know she'd rather be in the background and stuff like that. So I'm not going to bring up her name. She is a family friend. She happens to be my dad's girlfriend, and if you know who my dad is, then you know who his girlfriend is, and you can just tell her, any condolences and stuff like that. But, so yeah, her great aunt passed away years ago, and recently her dad passed away. I actually already gave my portion of a presents that me and my sisters are doing to give her condolences. My dad is staying with her until, I guess, after the funeral, which I think was Monday evening. I can't quite remember. He didn't really give me the details about the funeral. But let's go ahead and get to the book. And Mystery at the Ski Jump, it is dedicated to my family friend's father. May you rest in peace, sir. And so the Mystery at the Ski Jump, we start with Chapter 1, which is titled The Strange Woman. Brr, it's cold. Nancy Drew shivered and pulled the collar of her scarlet coat higher against the driving snow. Determinedly, she ducked her head and pushed along the darkening streets. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a long black car skidded across the sidewalk directly in front of her. "Oh!" Nancy cried out, leaping back just in time to keep from being hit. A second later, the car crashed into a porch. As Nancy dashed forward to see if the driver were hurt, the door of the house flew open and the excited owner, Mrs. Martin, rushed out. "What happened?" she demanded. Seeing the car, Mrs. Martin ran down the snowy steps. "Is someone hurt?" Nancy was already twisting at the handle of the driver's door. When she yanked it open, they saw a slender woman in a fur coat slumped across the steering wheel. Together, they carried the unconscious stranger into the house and laid her on a couch in the living room. "I think she's only stunned," Nancy announced, pressing her fingers to the victim's wrists. "Her pulse is regular, and the color's coming back to her cheeks." "Just the same, I think we ought to call Dr. Britt," Mrs. Martin said nervously. Will you do it, Nancy? The phone's in the hall. I'll get a blanket to put over her." Nancy called Dr. Britt's office. The line was busy, and it was nearly 5 minutes before she could get a connection. "Dr. Britt is out," she reported to Mrs. Martin, as the woman came down the stairs with a blanket. "His nurse said she would telephone him and ask the doctor to stop here as soon as possible." "Doctor? Who wants a doctor?" called an annoyed voice from the living room. "I have no need for a doctor." Nancy and Mrs. Martin were amazed to see the woman from the car sitting up on the couch. She was removing a gold makeup kit from the pocket of her coat. Now she calmly began to powder her nose and dab some exotic perfume. Nancy appraised her quickly. A strikingly handsome woman, about 35, with blue-black hair, pale skin, and high cheekbones. Handsome? Really? I know this is the 50s, but seriously. An expensive mink coat was draped nonchalantly over her slim shoulders. "Why, Mrs. Channing," said Mrs. Martin suddenly. "I didn't recognize you at first. I'm glad you feel better. Nancy, Mrs. Channing is from the Forest Fur Company." "Mrs. Channing, I'd like you to meet Nancy Drew. She lives here in River Heights with her father. He's a famous lawyer. And Nancy's one of the best young detectives I ever—" "Lawyer? Detective?" Mrs. Channing interrupted. There was such a sharp expression in her dark blue eyes when she looked at Nancy that the girl felt slightly embarrassed. "At least Dad is a fine lawyer," she replied, smiling. "Sometimes he asks me to help him on cases. Your work must be interesting too, Mrs. Channing. I've never heard of the Forest Fur Company. Where is it?" "Oh, we have many branches, Miss Drew, all over the country." Mrs. Channing started to rise from the sofa, but fell back weakly. "I think you really should see a doctor," Nancy suggested kindly. "You're still shaky from the accident." I'll be all right, Mrs. Channing answered emphatically. Perhaps if I have a cup of tea. Nancy turned to Mrs. Martin. I think I'd better run along. Oh, it's so cold outside. Do stay and have a cup of tea with us. It won't take a minute. Thank you, but I really can't, Nancy replied. I'm leaving with Dad on a trip in the morning and have a lot of last-minute packing to do. Nancy was looking forward to helping her father on a case in Montreal. He had promised to tell her about it at dinner. A few minutes later, she was shaking the snow from her coat and boots on the back porch of the Drew house. Opening the kitchen door, she called, Hello, Mrs. Gruen, I'm back. Well, I'm certainly relieved, replied a motherly voice from the hall. What a storm! The Drews' middle-aged housekeeper walked into the kitchen and smiled affectionately at Nancy. Hannah Gruen had been with the family for several years, ever since Nancy's mother had passed away. I was delayed by an accident. Car jumped the curb. The driver wasn't hurt, but I'm afraid Mrs. Martin's porch will need a lot of repairing. The conversation was interrupted by a telephone call from Nancy's friend, Ned Nickerson, asking for a date to a fraternity dance next month. Friend? More like boyfriend. She accepted gaily, then went upstairs to start packing. 5 minutes later, Hannah hustled into the bedroom. Look what I have to show you, cried the housekeeper. Nancy's eyes danced. A mink scarf, she exclaimed. It's beautiful. It was such a bargain. I couldn't resist, Mrs. Gruen explained excitedly. I've always wanted a fur scarf, but dared not spend the money. Nancy took the lovely neck piece and laid it around her shoulders. It's a gorgeous scarf. Where did you buy it? From a very charming lady, Mrs. Gruen answered. She was from the Forest Fur Company. You see, she had already sold the scarf to my friend, Esther Mills, and Esther suggested... Nancy was not listening. At mention of the Forest Fur Company, her thoughts went racing back to the mysterious Mrs. Channing. Nancy, do you think I was foolish? The housekeeper asked as the girl frowned. I'm not sure, Nancy answered absently. It does look like a good fur piece, but it's an odd way to sell expensive furs. I hope everything's all right, said Hannah, a worried look replacing her former eagerness. I also invested some money in Forest Fur Company stock. The lady, a Mrs. Channing, sold me 10 shares. I gave her $50 for it. But I'm sure it's okay. I have the certificate in my bureau drawer. Stocks? Really? You don't go door to door with that stuff. Not even in the 50s. That's just shady. Where is she staying? Why, I don't know. She didn't tell me. At that moment, Nancy heard the front door close and the sound of her father's firm footsteps in the hall. She laid an arm around Mrs. Gruen's plump shoulders and gave her a comforting squeeze. Don't worry. I'll run down and talk this over with Dad. Perhaps he knows the Forest Fur Company. Dad? Called Nancy, reaching the bottom step. I'm so glad you're home. Hello, dear. Tall, handsome Carson Drew kissed her cheek. Say, do I detect a worried look in those pretty blue eyes? Oh, nice there. Well, something's on my mind, Nancy acknowledged, and told her father about Mrs. Channing and the Forest Fur Company. I've never heard of the company, the lawyer remarked when she finished, but I certainly don't like the way they do business. No reliable company would peddle expensive furs and stock from door to door at bargain prices. I know, right? Please, ask Hannah to let me see her certificate. After reading it, he had to admit it looked all right, but added that he thought the company should be investigated. Mrs. Channing is still at Mrs. Martin's, Nancy said excitedly. Suppose I go over there and talk to her. Fine. Carson Drew nodded. I'll go with you. We can't let our Hannah be taken in by swindlers. The Martin home was only 2 blocks away. As the Drews reached it, Nancy cried out that Mrs. Channing's car was gone. She dashed up the broken porch steps and rang the bell hurriedly. The door swung open. "Mrs. Martin, is Mrs. Channing? She's gone!" "In her car?" Mrs. Martin's eyes blazed. "Yes. To put it plainly, Nancy, Mrs. Channing red out on me. When I brought that tea she asked for, she was gone. Her car, too. And not one word did she say about paying for the damage she did to my porch." "What's her address?" asked Nancy quickly. Mrs. Martin stared vacantly. "I don't know." That's not good. Chapter 2. A Serious Loss. Mrs. Martin invited Nancy and her father into the house and offered them chairs before the crackling fire. "I suppose I'll never find that's Mrs. R.I. Channing," she sputtered, "but that Forest Fur Company will pay for repairing my porch. Don't you think they should, Mr. Drew?" "That depends on whether or not Mrs. Channing was using a car of theirs, or at least was doing business for them at the time of the accident. Suppose you tell us everything you know about this woman." Before Mrs. Martin could start, they heard the sound of heavy feet on the porch stomping off snow, followed by the sound of the door buzzer. The caller was Dr. Britt, tired and cold after his long drive through the storm. When he learned that his intended patient had left in such a rude way, the physician was indignant. "I imagine so." "I don't blame you for being angry, Mrs. Martin," he agreed, stepping into the living room. "Anyone as ungrateful as Mrs. Channing doesn't deserve sympathy. Good evening, Mr. Drew. Hello, Nancy." Mrs. Martin indicated a third chair facing the fire. "You sit here and rest, Doctor. I was just going to tell what I know about Mrs. Channing. She came here 2 days ago and sold me a mink scarf and some stock in a fur company. She promised that the stock would make me a great deal of money. But now I don't trust her. You know what I think? That she ran away from here because of you, Nancy." "What?" "Before I went to get the tea, I told her how many cases you solved yourself, not just for your father. Like the clue of the black keys and the secret of the wooden lady. Now that I think of it, I believe Mrs. Channing got scared and left. We'll never find her." "Mrs. Channing also sold a mink scarf and some stock to our housekeeper, Mrs. Gruen. That's why I came back here." Dr. Britt looked thoughtful. Channing, he murmured. "I thought that name sounded familiar. Now I remember. My nurse, Ida Compton, showed me a fur piece and some stock certificates she purchased from a woman named Channing." "This is very interesting," Mr. Drew spoke up. "Nancy, why don't you see Miss Compton and find out if she can give you some additional information about Mrs. Channing?" "I certainly will. But by the time we get back from Montreal—" "I suggest that you stay here a couple of days and see what you can find out. You can follow me later." He arose, adding that Hannah Gruen probably was becoming uneasy over their absence. She would want to know what they had learned about Mrs. Channing. "And the delicious dinner I smell will be spoiled." Nancy smiled. "Let me drive you," offered the doctor. "Fortunately, the storm is dying down. It should be fair by morning." When the Drews arrived home, Mrs. Gruen met them with questioning eyes. They told her the truth, but begged her not to worry about the fur company stock. "It may be a good investment," said the lawyer cheerfully, although he doubted it. "And now how about some food? This is the best eating place in the country, Hannah." The housekeeper beamed. "Tonight it's pot roast, and big browned potatoes exactly as you like them." "Dessert?" "Pie, your favorites, apples with lots of cinnamon." "Lots of cinnamon?" I can't even say it now. Cinnamon! Ah, man, does that turn wheels in my head. Mrs. Gruen turned to Nancy. "Miss Marvin telephoned. She's coming over after dinner. And George, I can never get used to a girl with a boy's name. She's coming too." Nice backgrounds, slipping. "Grand," said Nancy. "The 3 of us will hold a farewell party for you, Dad. And I think I'm actually going to stop there only because my throat is already parched and it is actually getting close to a time where I need to head out. What did you think of that book, everyone? So far, it's already getting intense. Pretty crazy, right? It's going to be like that. No, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be even more intense later on in the book, especially for the climax. Jeez. So, okay, so the reason why I made that remark about the cinnamon is because I've actually learned cinnamon is an aphrodisiac. I am so immature at times. Gosh dang it, I can't control myself. Alright, we're good. I actually do want to check something on my iPod. I just got a notification of someone following me on Twitter. By the way, guys, I have 2 Twitter names you should probably check out. One is the Esperance243, same name, and the other is WW Ironically, that goes with my second YouTube channel, which is Rabbit Fun World, where I play Nancy Drew games, as well as a whole bunch of other things. Yeah, this has to be someone else. For a second, I thought the person that was following me is the same woman who does Siri for a lot of the Apple phones and iPods and stuff. I think it might be her, though. Oh, nope, it is her. It is her. The voice of Siri from all those Apple phones and stuff. She is finally following me after all this time. I've been following her for a while, actually. For a long time, actually. I think I've been following her for a little over a year. And she just now finally followed me on my main channel. My Esperanza profile, I should say. Well, that's cool. Guys, I've been getting followers left and right. And by the way, I know I've gotten a couple of other subscribers here on this channel. I will do a shout out to them. I can't remember their names right now, but I will do a shout out to them. Their names will be here as well as here. I am super excited. I will possibly be linking at least one of them for the card, which I am super psyched about because I finally understand how to do that. Shiza. Oh man. I'm actually really glad I'm getting back to the book readings. I've actually done the math and it's gonna the Vine compilations is actually gonna take a while. So I might do a few more, and then after that, I might start doing the book reading for one of my own books, just because I want to finish the Aquatica trilogy. I still don't know if I want to read the spin-off book or not. I honestly can't decide, so maybe you guys can help me out with that. Here's a challenge. How about if I can get 5 to 10 likes on this particular video, then I will continue with the Vine compilations. If I can get, if I can get 3 comments down below, then I will start doing the third book in the trilogy, which would be super awesome because the third book is just as good as the others. So I'm actually going to go ahead and head out because it is getting pretty close to the time where I need to get ready to leave. I hope you all have a great morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. I am the Esperanza243. Signing up.